Morning, everybody, and welcome to this episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand Farouk, and I'm here with my co-host, Nick Cegelski. And folks, we have on the show, again, the number one all-time producer at Salesforce. He is Ian Koniak. He has closed massive enterprise deals with companies like Berkshire Hathaway that are over $10-20 million deals. He has coached multiple sellers who've gone from making $200K to making $300K to then making $1 million plus W-2 in a single year. And he has a repeatable process to do it if you are trying to level up your enterprise sales game. Nick, why should people listen?
In this episode, you should expect to learn Ian's approach to planning your attack before you attack your plan. He'll get into things like, instead of trying to add more to your calendar, having addition by subtraction, meaning removing the things that don't actually help you. He talks about the concept of prioritizing what he calls RGAs, which are revenue generating activities, and how to say no to the stuff that honestly is a distraction from selling. And then he gets into a quarter by quarter breakdown of how at the enterprise level, you should be thinking about executing on those RGAs, because it's different in Q1 versus Q3. So if you're looking for an episode to help you cull the crap from your schedule and actually focus on stuff that moves the needle, this is one to hear. All right, Ian, welcome back to the show for round number 4. You might remember we start every single episode with your top 3 actionable takeaways. So let's get to your 3.
So number 1 is something I call addition by subtraction. One of the biggest challenges that reps face today is an inability to focus on RGAs during the day. And the reason why is because they are constantly checking their phones. There's a proliferation of apps and social media, and it's more noise than ever, both inside and outside of work. So this is about taking an inventory of the things that you do in your personal and professional life that you cannot do, because when you do them, not only do you feel bad, but it's actually hurting your ability to succeed in your personal and professional life. So most people say, well, add this, add more prospecting, add working out. But what they don't say is subtract this. So what I found is when you subtract the things that no longer serve you, that's the first step in making space and time for that which does. So I'll give you a simple example. What I do with my coaching clients is I have them install Opal. Anyone who struggles with RGAs and with focusing, I have them install Opal. And that's an app that can block any kind of website or application that might be a distraction, such as YouTube or TikTok or ESPN or fantasy football, whatever pick your poison, you can't get to it during work hours. So that forces people to actually stay in and focus. That's one thing. In the personal life, everyone's got different things that they want to subtract, but ultimately, those things that are hitting the dopamine cycle and releasing it make it much harder for you to focus at work. And so I always start there. Let's stop doing those things so you can be with your emotions, be with your feelings, and learn how to focus and do the hard things every day without getting constant distraction.
What's number 2?
Number 2 is the golden rule of time management. What I used to do when I was in sales is I would mess around during the day. I have severe ADHD. I was medicated for it. And what would happen is I'd feel guilty at the end of the day. I'd feel like I was busy, but I got nothing done. And I would not be as happy or as present with my family when I got home because I felt bad about how I showed up that day. And the golden rule of time management is very simple. It says the quality of time you spend at work determines both the quality and quantity of time you spend outside of work. Meaning that if I mess around during the day, not only will I feel bad and not be as present with my loved ones, but I'll also probably have to fire up the laptop late at night or on the weekends to catch up because I now feel guilty. So the way I like to think about it is if I'm not working during work hours, I'm robbing my family and my children of my presence and time. And that's not okay. It's not about me. It's about how I show up with them. And I've learned that the better I show up during the work hours, the more happier and joyful, and the more I enjoy my time outside of work. I'm very efficient and I don't mess around during the day. So for me, I know that I'm done at 6 and I don't have the option of firing up the laptop because that's family time when I get home. And therefore that forces me not only to work more efficiently, but also it forces me to work on the right things and prioritize how I'm spending my time during the day so that I can fully feel good about my results that day.
Round us out, Nate. What's the third?
The third takeaway is you got to have a system by which to implement and execute both setting boundaries and addition by subtraction. You need a system for time management. If you don't have a system, what you end up with is no way to prioritize the things that matter most. And you are basically making everything important and urgent rather than distinguishing between what's really important and you need to do now versus something that can wait or be deleted altogether. Okay. Or delegated. So 12-week year is a system I use for time management, and it involves three things. The essence is in 12 weeks, you can get more done than anyone else can do in a whole year. And I've seen this in my own life. When I was in Salesforce, I had a baby, my last year there, and I was facing, when I got back from paternity leave, a 1 million shortage to quota. And I'm like, how the heck am I going to sell $1 million in just one quarter? And so I bought this book, 12-week year. I implement it religiously. I finished at 1,050,000 and I hit my number and I was able to retire from Salesforce. And I have not stopped using this system since I've been a full-time entrepreneur. And in that time, in our first eligible year, we made the Inc. 5000. We did 3.5 million ARR last year. And it's all because of this system and being able to run your business essentially in quarters versus annually, because the annual is too far ahead to look. If you're just doing it in quarters, it helps you. So it's a 3-part system. It's very simple. I encourage everyone to buy the book because you'll really learn it if you get the book. But the first system is you set a quarterly plan, and that quarterly plan has a measurable goal at the end of it and the themes or categories by which you're going to execute that plan. So if I'm trying to sell $1 million, for example, my themes might be rigorous qualification of pipeline. My themes might be executive sponsorship and mapping to the biggest problems or priorities a client wants to solve. So you map out the goal, the 3 or 4 themes of the goal, and then the tactics underneath that. And then you use a weekly scorecard, which I have it right here. I do it every week. And in that week 1 through 12, you are writing all of your priorities for that week and you're ranking them. You're ranking them based on importance of what you should be doing from one. Usually I have 15 or 20 things. At the beginning of each day, you're blocking your calendar to be able to have the highest priorities items time block. So it's a great system because it involves goal setting, quarterly goal setting. It involves tracking and scoring how you're performing on a weekly basis. So at the end of the week, you need to actually measure how many things did I have on air and how many did I actually do. And the people that consistently do 85% of their tasks on their 12-week year hit their goals 99% of the time, as evidenced in the book, because it's very hard to score 85%. So I have not had a quarter I've missed my goal because I'm rigorously focused on the process of hitting 85%. And then, of course, it comes down to daily execution, putting it in the calendar, blocking it off, and making sure you actually keep your word to yourself to be able to do the thing you said you're going to do.
In the prep, you said if someone wants to make their first $1 million year in sales, the number one biggest problem you have to fix is most sellers spend 2 to 3 hours of their day on revenue generating activities. And if I'm a seller, I'm thinking, no, I'm selling all day. I might be working 10-hour days. It has to be more than 2 to 3 hours. I'm hoping you could unpack that for the audience a little bit more.
So 2 to 3 hours is consistently what I hear. So we have to define what is in that 2 to 3 hours. And it's very simple. It's anything that creates pipeline, which would fall under prospecting, and anything that advances pipeline, which would fall under things like scheduling a demo or a follow-up with the client or closing or getting an order form out or negotiating legal contracts, all that stuff, everything after it's a real deal. On average, people are wasting 2 to 3 hours a day from just not even working. That's the scary thing. Going on their phones, taking breaks, going in to get some snacks and just avoiding work, right? And they might fool themselves into thinking they're working because they're going online reading about something, but it's not necessarily an RGA. People tend to get distracted very easily and go down a rabbit hole. And then all of a sudden 20, 30 minutes have passed. So those add up. That's one thing. The other thing is things at work that are distractions. So think about email and Slack and busy work and internal meetings. Very simply, it's personal distractions and it's professional distractions. So you have to be religious about saying no to something that's not an RGA, including to yourself, frankly. That's the area I find that most reps struggle with is between meetings. It's that white space, right? White space typically is dead space. So if you really look at how many hours of meetings and prospecting people do, 2 to 3 hours is pretty spot on.
I have to imagine there are times that a seller gets things confused and they're doing activities that they believe are RGAs, and you have to be like, no. That is not creating new pipeline or advancing current pipeline. So my question for you is, what are some of the common activities that are almost false RGAs?
I focus mostly on strategic sellers, enterprise sellers, people selling larger deals, to be very clear. So anything where I have not prepped and I'm just cold calling blindly, where I do not know the persona, I do not know the problem I solve, the point of view that I've created, is a waste of time. I'm not going to call someone unless I really understand why I'm calling, how I can help, who they are, what their company's focused on. What people think is an RGA is I got to just hit the phones. I got to just send a bunch of emails. That's a waste of time. What I've seen from my $1 million earners, their RGAs are very much something we call deep work. Deep work is work that it occurs in the prefrontal cortex of your brain. It's the executive functioning. When you think about deep work, think about researching an account deeply, developing a point of view, preparing slides or something that can go to a C-suite with confidence, executive mapping, figure out who knows who that can connect you into the account, writing really powerful email copy, creating videos that are tailored and personalized. Those are the prospecting activities of deep work. And then the second thing is what actually happens when you get in one of these sales cycles that frankly take a while with strategic selling. And that's the area most people struggle with. We're talking about putting together big project plans, mapping out spreadsheets with lots of different scenarios for pricing options. We're talking about building decks that need to go to board. Some of these decks are 50 to 100 pages. We're talking about strategizing and mapping out all the different executives. These things people don't know to do and they don't know how to do because they're not taught traditionally as we come up in the sales training world.
So Ian, this was a huge paradigm shift for me when you came onto the show the first time, where you're like, everyone's been trained to do 200 cold calls per week, and that works in SMB, it works in mid-market. You need to pipe 5 50K deals per month. That's going to get you 1 or 2. That's going to get you your 100K per month. It's going to hit you your 300K quota. Easy. But if you want to do $1 million in a year, W-2, you've got to figure out how you're going to go pipe your next $10 or $20 million deal. And you can make 200 calls to the wrong accounts or not put in the right effort on a key account and never have that door open for you again. So if you're like, okay, you're not going to make $200 per week, I would love to make this tactical and real for the audience. Do you have an example where one of the sellers you were coaching, they piped their next $10 million deal? And I'm curious, is there an example or a story that you could share of how they broke into that $10 million deal differently?
It's really important to go to the top of the organization. And most sellers feel very comfortable fumbling with engineers or director level, maybe VPs. That's their comfort zone. But if you want to do a $10 million deal, it's going to the board. It needs to have executive sponsorship. It's about taking that message to the person who's responsible for that top initiative. So again, fundamentally, you're going to a CTO and he's like, yeah, we have a huge team around cyber and this and that. This is what we have to do. It's how we've always got it done. And the point of view is it's gotten you this far, but it's not going to get you to the next level. It's not going to actually get you where you want to go. We've talked about yo-yo selling on previous episodes, but yo-yo selling is about once you get that sponsorship, then you could float the exec's name around. You can float them as wanting to do an assessment and understand and come back up. And that's really, again, where the RGAs are. It's not just, oh, I'm smiling down. It's I'm getting executive sponsorship to go in, and then it's all the follow-up that you can collect and understand the information to then surface back up to the execs with the exec readout. Of all the $1 million earners I have, almost all of them have 80 to 90% coming from 1 or 2 accounts. That's it. So that's the key. And that's what, again, most sellers get wrong. It's less is more.
Nick and I learned this when we were selling 30 MPC sponsorships together. If we're talking to someone below the line, oftentimes we're doing problem-based discovery because they're below the line folks who are like, I have this problem of generating enough leads to hit my pipeline goal this quarter. The moment you cross above the line, it switches to priority-based discovery, where these executives have already decided these are the 3 or 4 most important things in my business, Anything else that you recommend outside of those 3 or 4 priorities is a complete waste of time. Get out of my face. I don't want to hear you try to tell me why my SDRs aren't sequencing fast enough and you have a faster sequencing tool if it's not in one of my 3 or 4 priorities. Okay. So Ian, I know how to do this on a discovery call where I can present a POV. I can ask them about this. But when I'm first reaching out to Berkshire Hathaway or Bank of America or Capital One, and I'm trying to figure out the priorities of the CIO of Capital One, how do I figure that stuff out before I've even had a conversation with those guys?
I don't think you figure it out before you've had a conversation. I think you understand at a high level what the executives are focused on, and you can typically get that from the 10K. You can get it from the quarterly earnings. There's also resources and assets that you can actually see how executives are compensated. If you go into their investor relations page, it shows how executives are compensated, what they're measured on. So going in and really understanding those high level areas, number one, is super important. Number two is typically if you're any C-suite executive, you have some type of interview or some type of podcast or some type of article in which you've been interviewed, especially at the big companies. You just Google their name and the name of their company, and you'll see an announcement or what they're focused on or some keynote that they've done or some vendor show that they've spoken at, and they'll map out and they'll tell you. So you want to research the company and the individual. And the third thing you want to do with research is you want to talk to their people. You want to say, hey, what is your CIO asking you to do? What are the top initiatives that you're being tasked with? What are the top projects? Tell me kind of what you're hearing over and over again at the highest level, and float that with the directors and the VP level before you get in. And then you can go back and say, hey, I've talked to your team and I read this and I understand you're focused on here. Here's something you might not be thinking about that's getting in the way that we can directly impact. Let's get a meeting. And again, that takes a few weeks, right? That's not a quick process, but it's absolutely an RGA. Developing the point of view is what enables you to get in the door with these senior executives.
One of the things that I'm hearing from you is that any activity that I am doing that is helping me develop a sharper point of view so that I can go outbound an account, that's an RGA. And one of the ones that you mentioned that I haven't heard anybody ever talk about on the show before is talking to basically adjacent reps at companies that are doing business with the account you're prospecting into. You shared the example of the AWS rep. If you have a relationship with that person, they can give you intel on the account so that it will inform your POV and you can prospect more intelligently. My question for you is, let's say I'm a rep who's sitting here and being like, damn, this Ian guy's pretty sharp. I need to go do that. How do I figure out who those adjacent reps are? What do I say to them when I'm like, hey, can you help me break into Berkshire Hathaway? I have to imagine there's a way that you brokered some of those relationships in your career.
The partner channel is a good place to start because a lot of these larger companies are doing business with Accenture and Deloitte, PwC, these larger consulting companies, and they tend to have branches. Again, if you work for a bigger company like a ServiceNow or an Oracle or a Salesforce, they'll have a team member on those teams that are just assigned to Salesforce. So typically each company has somebody who's a partner liaison that their job is to facilitate the partnership. So I would go to the partner liaison first and I'd say, what partners are in there? Can we find out who's already working with them? And can I get an introduction? And I would meet with some of the partners that are already doing business there. If you're at a startup company, it's going to be a little harder. I use AWS because they're a great example because they do a pass-through revenue model where a lot of solutions for the startups like Snowflake, for example, or other applications, they actually can purchase it as part of their AWS EDP, which is the enterprise discount program. So they're committed to AWS to spend a certain amount per year, 100 million a year, 50 million a year, big contracts. And that includes all items on the AWS marketplace. So if I'm already on the AWS marketplace, I'm going to talk to AWS and say, hey, we have this opportunity. You're getting credit for it. I'm getting credit for it. Let's tackle it together. Who can we talk to and leverage that relationship? If it's not a product that is large or not a product on the AWS marketplace or where there's a natural fit for a partnership, you really just want to have a good network that you can find out who sold to this account before, or go on LinkedIn Navigator and go see specifically who's connected with your target contacts. And then what I did is I would see who's a second degree connection with some of the contacts I'm going after. And I say, do you really know this person? If so, can you make an intro? And that's always the best if you can get a warm handoff or a warm referral. So maybe you don't talk to a partner. Maybe you talk to someone who's connected, who worked there. It could be someone who worked there previously. It could be someone who sold there, but somebody in your network knows the people you're trying to sell to, the CIO. So just hitting them up and asking, do you actually know them or are you just connected? And would you mind talking to me briefly about your background with them? I'm trying to target this. Even better is do you mind making a warm intro and writing the intro for them? So ghost writing a note so they can go in and actually make that introduction, because they're not just going to introduce you. You got to make it super easy for them. So if you just ghost write a blurb and connect, that's huge too. The last thing I'd say, Nick, is go freaking hire a coach, take a course on strategic selling, work with me, work with Jamal, work with anybody that's done this before. Don't try to do it on your own. This is a different motion.
I want to pivot back to some of the stuff you were talking about at the front end of the show, which was the habits and not doing 2 to 3 hours of revenue generating activities. So we know what real revenue generating activities look like. Not making 200 dials, but building an actual account plan, building your point of view, working your way across the organization, mapping out ways to go from the CIO to the CISO or what have you. So if you were putting a seller that you were trying to get to make $1 million that year on a weekly plan or on a daily plan, what does like an awesome week or day look like in strategic selling?
I wouldn't say it would be a misconception to do what you do. If they put together a killer point of view over the course of a week that they can use all year and get meetings with COOs, CFOs, CIOs, that would be time better spent than any amount of cold calling they can do in that same week. Mm-hmm. The top strategic sellers are only working maximum 5 accounts. Most are working 1 to 2 accounts, just to be very clear. This applies to large companies. You could sell the enterprise, but have a low ticket product that's 30, 40, 50K. You're not doing enterprise selling, just to be clear. Enterprise selling is transformational selling. There are some major players in the space, and they're not spending a lot of time with multiple accounts. They're deep diving into 1 or 2 accounts. It's not a weekly or a daily, this is what good looks like. It's a yearly plan. So Q1 is all about account planning. It's all about making sure you understand knowledge transfers and understand exactly where the bodies are buried within the account, and you get all the intel from the previous rep. It's about looking at the history of the account. It's about understanding their initiatives and priorities. That's typically month 1, I would say, is really spending your time. And you're only going to do this for a couple accounts. Month 2 and 3, now you got to take that point of view and take it to the execs and see, is this real? Is this aligned with their priorities? Do they have an appetite? Do you want to move forward with an assessment? Q2 is you want to get the assessment done. So an assessment would typically take, I would say, 6 to 12 weeks on average. An assessment is when you look at the people, the process, the technology, the cost center to really map out the current state of what they're in and what they're spending and where the bottlenecks are and what does that look like? And then the future state, which is how would it look if they were to partner us with a transformational deal. You want to get executive sponsorship into one. You want to complete the assessment and really understanding in Q2, and in Q3, you want to be presenting, proposing, negotiating, and closing and be at your number by the end of Q3. You want to be at your number at Q3 from a couple of these deals. So that's how I think of the time. Now, if you break that into the week, if you're using a system like a 12-week year, it's going to be different from week to week. So week 1 in Q1 would be really about getting the account plans mapped out. Week 2 would be socializing the account plan with the team and getting all your team involved. I had 30 people on my team at Salesforce. So I had about 10 co-primes for Tableau and MuleSoft and Service Cloud and Marketing Cloud. They all had engineers. There was a business value team. There was an architecture team, and there were CSMs assigned to all these different areas. So you're talking about a director of accounts that are spending $10, $20 million if you're a strategic seller, and you're trying to get them to spend 30, 40 million, right? So it's a different ballgame when you're in enterprise selling. You really need to involve your team. You need to float the point of view with them. You got to figure out what the white space is in the account, right? All of that is like month 1. Then it's about maybe my marketing cloud is tackling their marketing person, right? Maybe my Tableau person's working with their BI, and I'm having weekly meetings with the team to see if we're progressing against our pipeline goals for developing pipe. Q1, develop pipe. Q2 is advanced pipe. Q3 is close pipe. Q4 is run away now because we're already sitting over our number. Now we're in accelerators and it's all gravy. So that's how I think about it versus what's the perfect week. It's really the perfect quarter.
In that first quarter, you're building your POV and you're testing that POV and you're trying to figure out which of these things even has multi-million dollar potential. And you're going to have a lot of first meetings in that first quarter where you're sniffing it out and you're like, this deal's not going to go anywhere in Q3. What smells like a $10 million deal versus not?
It's not about, is the deal good or not? Is this a real deal or not? It's about who cares about my point of view. So it's a different paradigm in a sense, because if you have a strong point of view in the bottom of the heart, you're going to help them. You might have some things that need to be tweaked, but ultimately it's mapped to their biggest priorities that everyone in the C-suite cares about, and they're putting out on the street and they're declaring as their top level initiative. Let's say I'm Gong and I'm selling revenue intelligence. I'm going to want to understand exactly what reps are talking about. I'm going to want to understand if it's being positioned, the AI solution. I'm going to understand what the best reps are doing that are selling and monetizing their AI investments differently than everyone else. And I'm going to want to bring those insights to the executives so that everyone can be able to model and record and basically make sure that they're talking about that and they're selling that, because that is getting killed on the stock market, their inability to sell their new AI solution. If I'm Salesforce, it's the same thing with Agentforce, right? So if you have a software that can help give visibility or intelligence or insights, you can develop a point of view. If I'm selling Adobe and I'm selling Gong, I'm going to say, hey, Adobe, I know you have this initiative around selling these areas. I know the stock has been hit. One thing you may not be thinking about is the importance of what reps are talking about on calls. And are they in a position, are they trained, or are they talking to executives? And what are your customers saying about these new products? Where is their resistance? Why isn't it selling? If you don't have those conversations recorded, if you don't have an easy way to aggregate the data from those conversations, you're shooting blind. So we found that customers that track the conversations and what customer intent is and customer resistance are and model the best behaviors of sales reps are producing 30% more revenue than customers that don't. And for you, that translates to, $4 billion, right? Now we are having a conversation with the CRO, CFO, anyone at the C-suite. Ultimately, like, my stuff helps your stuff. That is the message. And if that message, if you're a believer in it and you feel passionate about it, like, you're going to stick with that point of view. You're not just going to abandon it because you're talking to a lower level that doesn't care about revenue or doesn't care about sales performance or productivity or any of the metrics. You need to be talking to the people that stand to gain or lose the most from hitting their initiatives or their priorities, and show them how they can do it faster and mitigate risk if they're using your solution. You got to find as many people as you talk to until you get the change agent who's like, yes, yes, and yes. Couldn't have said it better myself. Where do we go from here? That's how you know your deal's real. It's not because the account said no. It's because a person in the account said yes, because you'll get 20 no's in the same account before you get the yes from the right person who actually cares about the problem you're solving. That's the key.
We talked about a lot of good habits that the best strategic sellers exhibit. We end every interview with the bad one. And Nick's Wi-Fi is out, and so I'm asking the final question. So what is the biggest bad habit that you see sellers make who are trying to figure out how to make their first $1 million deal, but they're not able to get there?
I go back to addition by subtraction. And this is a personal habit. The biggest thing that I'm seeing people struggle with right now is phone addiction. And the habit is they pick up their phone all the time throughout the day. They check notifications, they check text, they check whatever. If you just take your damn phone and turn it on silent when you're trying to do some of this deep work, POV development, prospecting strategy, planning your 12-week year, if you just literally put your phone off, I like to do this, and I'll show you what I do. I got a couch back there, take this phone, and throw it on the couch. And it's away from me. Put it on silent. That's it. Don't pick up your phone during the day and see how you are forced to do the hard work, the deep work. I always, at the beginning of the day, block off my calendar so there's no white space apart from the lunch hour. I take an hour every day to refresh, recharge for the lunch hour. And that really, really helps me be focused in the morning and focused in the afternoon. So that's it, man. Get rid of that damn phone during work hours. Get rid of those apps. Install Opal so you're not distracted. And then go find a mentor. Go get the help you need to be a strategic seller, because grinding will not get you to the level that you need to in the next stage of your career, period. Grinding doesn't work in enterprise sales.
If you guys want to learn more about what Ian does, we're going to include 2 resources in the show notes. Number 1, Ian actually has a free 12-week course on how to build the fundamental habits of elite tech Seller. So if you want to dig in more on some of the stuff that he was talking about today, definitely go take that. And on top of that, he talked about a sequence a little bit earlier. And so you can go check that out as well. There's a link to a breakdown on a YouTube video as well. Everyone hang on for a 60-second recap coming up soon. Cheers. Alrighty, Nick, it's time for a 2x2 recap from this episode with Ian Koniak. What do you have for your 2?
Number 1 is make a not to-do list so that you can focus on addition by subtraction. What this means is instead of thinking that you need to work harder and white knuckle more to hit your goal, before trying to add in more prospecting or add in more demo practice or whatever, look at your calendar and say, what can I actually stop doing to create more room for strategic thinking and focus or on prospecting or on whatever you need to actually hit your goal? Number 2, my favorite. Prioritize RGAs. An RGA is one of two things. It is either creating new pipeline, that's number 1, or it is advancing current pipeline. Anything else is noise.
Number 3, the $1 million enterprise deals are sold quarter by quarter like this. In Q1, you are building your POV and you're doing the initial land. You're trying to figure out who is even willing to take a meeting with you. Number 2, in Q2, you're going through the assessment. In other words, you're trying to get someone to be the executive sponsor to go on a discovery journey and figure out if you're willing to partner with them and solve a problem together. And then lastly, number 3, in Q3, you go through proposal, negotiation, procurement, and vendor review. And that leaves you with entire Q4 to collect your $1 million W-2 check. And then lastly, number 4, when you're reaching out to enterprise accounts, you do not have 1 million of them. And so you should only be focusing on the top 20% of your accounts that are likely to yield the big deals. And the way you work them is through the rule of 100. You have to reach out to 10 executives, and it literally takes a minimum of 10 touches to break in. So that means you probably need 100 touch points to realistically work an enterprise account, and you can probably only do 10 of those a day. So do not spray and pray. Alrighty, Nick, how can people help us out?
So one of the concepts that Ian talked about in this episode is this concept called yo-yo selling, where you start at the top, you get permission from the executive to go meet with their team and learn way more, and then you also get permission to come back to that executive with the discovery that you did about their organization. It's called yo-yo selling. We put together a guide on the 30MPC newsletter that goes deep into how to actually execute this top-down, down to the team, back to the top motion, and I found it really helpful in my deals. There's a link in the show notes. Go check it out. We'll see you next week on the show.